All right, let's get right into it. Have you ever seen a product that looks like it's just going to take over the world and then it just stops? The reviews are amazing, users are signing up like crazy, and then suddenly the whole thing just starts to sputter and fall apart. Well, today we're going to dig into why most products fail. Not because they're bad ideas, but because they can't handle their own success. And this right here, this is the core of it all. It says scaling a digital product fails, not because of bad ideas, but because of broken foundations. Think about that. The idea was great, the product was great, but the ground it was built on was weak. That changes how we have to look at this whole problem. So, it really boils down to two completely different mindsets. On one side, you've got optimize for launch. This is where most teams live, right? They're racing to hit a deadline, trying to impress investors, just get the thing out the door. But that road leads to a mess of tech debt, getting locked in with vendors and teams that don't talk to each other. But then there's the other way, optimize for scale. This is about building it right from day one, thinking about the future. And that gets you a product that's resilient, flexible, and where everyone feels like they own the whole thing together. Okay, so that brings us to the heart of the problem. We're going to look at the 5 major cracks that can show up in a product's foundation. You can think of these as the hidden in plain sight failures that cause those big, public, scaling disasters we all hear about. Yep, there are 5 of them. 5 really specific, really common issues that, if you don't deal with them, will almost guarantee that your successful product will just crumble under its own weight. So let's get into the first crack. No end-to-end ownership. This is what happens when you have one team for strategy, another for design, and maybe a third-party company for the actual engineering. Every time the project gets handed off, it's like a gap opens up and quality and accountability just fall right through. So what do we mean by end-to-end or E2E? It's pretty simple, really. It's about managing the entire life cycle of the product, from the very first sketch on a napkin, through the design, the code, the testing, all the way to launch day, all under one roof with one strategy. No gaps, and more importantly, no finger pointing. All right, on to crack number 2, architecture that's built for today, but not for tomorrow. Oh man, this is such a classic trap. You build a lean, mean MVP to get started, which is awesome, but the actual tech underneath it was picked to be fast and cheap now, with no thought for what happens when you suddenly have 10 times or 100 times the users. And the pain from that mistake? It's brutal. Trying to go back and fix a bad architecture choice is unbelievably expensive. You end up with a system that just can't keep up with demand, and you're forced to try and fix it while everything is on fire, right when your customers need you the most. It's kind of like trying to change the engine of an airplane while it's in mid-flight. It's not going to end well. Crack number 3, treating quality assurance, or QA, as the very last step in the process. This is such an old way of thinking, Build the whole thing, then see if it works. The problem is, when you wait until the end to find the bugs, they're way, way harder and more expensive to fix. And then you have crack number 4, skipping that constant feedback loop with your users. So many teams just build stuff based on what they think people want. But the products that actually scale successfully, they're built by constantly listening to what real users are saying, watching what they're actually doing, and then changing things based on that feedback. And finally, crack number 5 is underestimating just how complex the day-to-day operations can be. Things like performance speed, security, and just being compliant with regulations, those aren't features you can just sprinkle on at the end. They have to be baked in from the start. If you ignore them, you're just building up a huge mountain of problems that will come back to haunt you later. Okay, so we've looked at all the ways things can go wrong. That's the bad news. The good news is there's a solution. Here it is, the blueprint for scale. It's a 6-step framework for building that solid foundation we've been talking about right from the very beginning. This is basically your playbook. Number 1, agree on what scale even means for you before a single line of code is written. 2, choose one partner who can handle the whole thing. 3, build using a modular API-first design. 4, build in observability, which is just a fancy way of saying the ability to see what's going on inside your system from day 1. 5, automate how you release new code. And finally, number 6, treat security like it's part of the foundation, not a deadbolt you add on at the end. And hey, just to really drive home how critical step 4 observability is, look at this. It's the difference between resolving a production incident in 10 minutes versus 10 hours. I mean, when your site is down and you're losing money every second, that difference is everything. It's about seeing the problem instantly, not stumbling around in the dark. All right, to make this super practical, here is a checklist for the decision makers out there. These are the sharp, no-nonsense questions you absolutely need to ask your team or any partner you're thinking of hiring before you give a project the green light. First up, how will this architecture perform at 10 times our current load? Don't let them talk about a 20% increase. Ask about massive growth. Make them think big. Next question. What is our target for detecting and responding to an incident? Not do you have a plan, but what is the number? This tells you immediately if they're serious about operations. And this one hits right back at that first crack we talked about. Who, specifically, owns the product from start to finish? And how exactly are you managing handoffs? You want a person's name, not a department. You want a documented process, not just hopes and dreams. Then you gotta ask, how are the non-functional things like performance, security, uptime, how are those actually defined and measured? Because if they can't measure it, I promise you they can't manage it. And finally, this is a real gut check question. What does our rollback strategy look like when a new release fails? It's a simple question, but it separates the pros from the amateurs. Because things will fail. The pros have a plan for when it does. So here's the bottom line. If the answers you get to those questions are wishy-washy or vague, your foundation isn't ready. It's really that simple. Avoiding these hard questions now just means you'll be paying for it tenfold down the road. And you know, this focus on a strong foundation is exactly why custom-built software often scales so much better than an off-the-shelf solution. Just think about it. Off-the-shelf tools are built for the average company. But at scale, your unique way of doing things is what counts. Custom software is designed from the ground up for your workflows, which means fewer bottlenecks when things really take off. So what should you take away from all this? If you remember 3 things, make it these. First, scaling isn't a future event. It's a discipline you practice from day one. Second, choose a single, unified partner instead of trying to stitch together a bunch of different vendors. And finally, demand that your product is ready for scale before it ever sees the light of day. And that really just leaves us with one final thought. Your next big product, maybe the future of your company, is on the line. So the question you have to ask yourself is, are you building on solid ground or on a broken foundation?